is Polyphonic Press, the podcast where two music fans pick a classic album completely at random. Using the patented random album generator, they are given an album to review from a curated list of over 1,000 classic releases, spanning multiple genres. And now onto the show. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Boyd and John Van Dyke.
Hey, welcome to Polyphonic Press. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
And I'm John Van Dyke.
And let's not waste any time. We've got the patented random album generator right in front of us here. So let's hit the button and see what album we're going to be listening to this week. And the album we're going to be listening to is Mothers of Invention, Freak Out.
Oh boy.
Or Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. Or is it just the Mothers of Invention?
Frank Zappa's involved, but it is just the Mothers of Invention. But he's there.
Okay.
It's his band. So
Right.
I do know this album. I have it.
I don't know this album. I'm not that familiar with the Mothers of Invention or Frank Zappa, or I know I admire him. So this is what it says on allmusic.com. It says, one of the most ambitious debuts in rock history, Freak Out was a seminal concept album that somehow foreshadowed both art rock and punk at the same time. Its 4 LP sides deconstruct rock conventions right and left, eventually pushing into territory inspired by avant-garde classical composers. Yet the album is sequenced in an accessibly logical progression. The first half is dedicated to catchy satirical pop rock songs that question assumptions about pop music, setting the tone for the radical new direction of the second half, opening with the nonconformist call to arms, Hungry Freak's Daddy. Freak Out quickly posits the Mothers of Invention as the antithesis of teen idol bands, often with sneering mockeries of the teen romance songs that had long been rock's commercial stock in trade. Despite his genuine emotional alienation and dissatisfaction with pop conventions, though, Frank Zappa was actually a skilled pop composer, even with the raw performances and his stinging guitar work. There's a subtle sophistication apparent in his unorthodox arrangements and tight, unpredictable melodicism. After returning to social criticism on the first song of the second half, the perceptive Watts Riot protest Trouble Every Day, Zappa exchanges pop song structure for experiments with musique concrète, amelodic dissonance, shifting time signatures, and studio effects. It's the first salvo in his career-long project of synthesizing popular and art music, high and low culture. While these pieces can meander, they virtually explode the limits of what can appear on a rock album, and effectively illustrate Freak Out's underlying principles: acceptance of differences and free individual expression. Zappa would spend much of his career developing and exploring ideas, both musical and conceptual, first put forth here. While his myriad of directions often produced a more sophisticated work, Freak Out contains at least the rudiments of almost everything that followed, and few of Zappa's records can match its excitement over its own sense of possibility.
All right.
Okay, so this album was released on June 27th, 1966. The genre is experimental rock and produced by Tom Wilson and released on Verve Records. And it's a double LP. So I think what we'll do, I guess we could consider one record half the record and the other half. So what we'll do is we'll listen to the first disc, sort of, and then stop halfway through and then listen to the second half. And so we encourage you to listen along, and I've linked the album in the show notes on both Apple and Spotify, so you can get it on your preferred medium. And what we'll do, so the album starts with Hungry Freaks, and we'll stop halfway through after you're probably wondering why I'm here. So without further ado, here, let me get it.
Isn't it Hungry Freak's Daddy?
Yes, Hungry Freak's Daddy. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is the first song on Freak Out, Hungry Freak's Daddy. Here we go. All right, and ending the first half of the album with "You're probably wondering why I'm here." Yeah, this is quite an album so far. I mean, it's got everything.
Pretty much, even kazoos.
It's got jangle pop elements, psychedelic elements. Yeah, it's a freak out. It's I liked what I think it was the song "Go Cry on Somebody Else's Shoulder." It's like a 50s ballad, but the lyrics are the exact opposite of what a 50s ballad, like that typical 50s ballad would be. So it's in that style, but it's the exact opposite. And that was really well done. And there's a lot of like 50s sort of parodies. Yeah, I really like this so far. This is like, it's very funny. Like it's done with a very intentional sense of humor. And I really like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured this was going to be a winner. I'm sort of listening to it with a fresh ear myself. I'm very familiar with a few songs on it for sure. Like you said, I have the album. But I don't listen to it like all the way through very often. And I should, because it is pretty good.
Yeah, but it was not well received when it came out.
No, it's a classic now, but no one knew what to make of it, as of most stuff like this.
Yeah, and I was reading on this is just on Wikipedia here, and it's very funny. It's Freak Out reached number 130 on the Billboard chart, and was not a critical success when it was first released in the United States. Many listeners were convinced that the album was drug-inspired and interpreted the album's title as slang for a bad LSD trip. The album, which is funny because if you know anything about Frank Zappa, he never did any drug or drank any alcohol at all. The album made the Mothers of Invention immediate underground darlings with a strong countercultural following. In the Real Frank Zappa book, Zappa quotes a negative review of the album by Pete Johnson of the Los Angeles Times, who wrote, "I guess you might call it surrealistic painting set to music. No content to record, just two sides of musical gibberish. The Mothers of Invention devote 4 full sides to their type of quote-unquote artistry. If anyone owns this album, perhaps you can tell me what in the hell is going on. The Mothers of Invention, a talented but warped quintet, have fathered an album poetically entitled Freak Out, which could be the greatest stimulus to the aspirin industry since the income tax."
That sounds like the type of, I think Frank Zappa would be kind of proud of that.
Yeah.
I do admire the guy's wittiness.
Yeah. Yeah, very well written, but still very, it's funny, but yeah.
Obviously he doesn't get it, but yeah.
No, and not many people did in this time, because it's like, this is 66. I mean,
this is just the very beginning of the psychedelic movement and stuff like that. Not that this album is purely psychedelic by any stretch of the imagination, but there are elements. But that music wasn't weird yet.
Well, it was, but it was still in the underground at that point.
Yeah, there was in the forefront of the cult. Yeah, you really had to dig to get some weird stuff though back then. It's a little more readily available since about this year. So 1966 was probably, I would say, weird music's introduction into like the mainstream.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And so you're not going to get a lot of people get it. The other thing that I thought was kind of funny too was, and you probably know this, but if you don't have the actual physical copy of it, it says Verve, which is the record company, released Freak Out on June 27th, 1966. The band's name was changed to the Mothers of Invention, a name Zappa chose in favor of MGM's original suggested name, the Mothers Auxiliary. The album's back cover included a letter from Zappa-created fictional character Susie Cream Cheese, who also appears on the album itself, which read, "These mothers is crazy. You can tell by their clothes. One guy wears beads and they all smell bad. We're going to get them for a dance after the basketball game, but my best pal warned me you can never tell how many will show up. Sometimes the guy in the fur coat doesn't show up, and sometimes he does show up, only he brings a big bunch of crazy people with him, and they dance all over the place. None of the kids at my school like these mothers, especially since my teacher told us what the words to their songs meant. Sincerely forever, Susie Cream Cheese, Salt Lake City, Utah." And it says, because the text was printed in a typeface resembling typewriter lettering, some people thought that Susie Cream Cheese was real, and many listeners expected to see her in concert performances. Because of this, it was decided that it would be best to bring along a Susie Cream Cheese replica who would demonstrate once and for all the veracity of such a beast. Because the original voice of Susie Cream Cheese, Jeannie Vassoir, was unavailable, Pamela Zarubica took over the part. They're creating their own characters and their own lore in a time when like that just wasn't done. Like Alice Cooper would do stuff like that a couple years later, but like, you know, this is kind of like, I don't know. It's just, it's funny that they're just inventing and then like Iron Maiden had like Eddie the skeleton character and all that, but like I don't think anyone had really done anything like that before this. I could be wrong, but I can't
think of anything.
Yeah.
No, I can't really think of anything quite like that. Creating your own lore, really.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's basically this is sort of setting up a lot of things that would become sort of trendy or like commonplace in like 1970s rock.
Yeah.
And this is like they're doing it like a decade earlier, you know, and it's I didn't know how I didn't realize how forward thinking Frank Zappa is in that way. But I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really was. I mean, there's footage from the early 60s of him going on a talk show and playing a bicycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that.
And showing them how to play a bicycle, which is totally tongue in cheek, but he's totally straight faced through the whole thing.
Well, anyway, I guess we'll get on with it. We'll get to the second half of the album, and it starts off with the song "Trouble Every Day," and I think it says on Wikipedia here that it's that "Help I'm a Rock" is split into 3 different pieces.
Yeah, I think it was.
It's sort of like a continued thing. So I'm curious, I guess it's divided in half. One half is like pop music and this half is more experimental, I guess.
Yeah.
Not
that the first half was like straight pop music.
True. Very true.
But yeah, this side is a little more, oddly enough, this side they take a little bit more seriously, but it's more experimental.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it's not too serious because they got a song called Help I'm a Rock. But yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right. So I'm looking forward to this. So here we go. So it starts off with Trouble Every Day. So here we go. All right, and ending the album with The Return of the Son of Monster Magnet.
Yep.
I don't think you could really call that a song.
No, it's 12 minutes of a lot of randomness.
Events, I guess.
Yeah.
Events of music. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's the second half was interesting. I think I prefer the first half, just because it's got like songs, and I think but like the second half was interesting for sure.
I always love Trouble Every Day. It's a really good song.
That's a really good song. Yeah. Yeah, and it is a little more serious subject matter, and yeah, it's more of a serious song, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, this is it's a weird album, but I like it. It's very strange, but yeah, I really like it. It's a like I have heard Frank Zappa stuff before, like, but I'm not that familiar with it, like I said. And I never really dug too deep into his stuff.
Well, his I mean, he covered a wide variety of stuff. Like, he's got albums out that were like, I guess the Mothers of Invention were a little bit more like, for lack of a better term, his pop band. Well, I guess it's more of a rock band. Some of the other albums that he put out, like We're Only in It for the Money and Weasels Rip My Flesh, I've got more of like that standard song structure in it, like the first half of this album. But he's also known for doing like a lot of jazz stuff, or sort of his take on jazz as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is this album kind of has everything too. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, obviously he's a very very competent musician. I mean, he knows, and there's famous stories of people like auditioning for his band, and they have to play what is known as the black page, which is like sheet music. You have to sight read sheet music, and it's called the black page because it's all filled in. Like, there's so many notes that you have to play, and so he's very particular with the people that he gets to be in his band, and he knows a lot of theory and a lot of like, he knows a lot about music. And there were times in here where they were doing some interesting stuff with like playing with the scales and time signatures, and this is even before like progressive rock was doing any sort of stuff. Like, so he's like, and I'm hearing like, it's interesting what the review said. It was talking about how I can't remember the exact quote, but it was talking about how there was like, it was early like influence on punk rock, but also progressive rock. Like, he's kind of, and this is, like we said, this is 1966. Nobody was doing anything like this at the time, or if they were, it was, in the underground. And, I mean, I think this is, I think you can kind of set this album as the starting point to the next decade of what the music is going to look like for the next decade. Like I said, like, there's like the lore of that character, Susie Cream Cheese, and having someone dress up as her in concerts, like bringing more of a spectacle to rock. And that was like huge in the 70s with like Alice Cooper and Kiss and all that sort of stuff. And like the music and sort of inventing progressive rock basically. And doing like this was 2 years before the Beatles did Revolution 9, which is something similar to the last track.
Yes.
So it's,
very apt.
So, so, he's kind of inventing all these things. It's the name of the band is pretty accurate. The Mothers of Invention, because they kind of are. They kind of invented what music would look like for the next 10 years on one album.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's pretty it's yeah, that's a good way to put it, I think. It's I'm thinking of some of the other albums that they put out in that succession. Like I'm a big fan of his late 60s, early 70s stuff. And it's this album is not only just the beginning of what he was going to do, it's sort of the beginning of what everybody was going to do.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, like everything, it's ahead of its time, and it's not appreciated in its time, and it wasn't popular. And I mean, how many artists can you count that's true of, where their stuff just wasn't appreciated in its time? Thankfully, he, became popular and lived to see his.
Well, it's funny because he was well known at the time, but the album wasn't. It's funny. He was well known at the time, but not because he was selling music really, really well. He was kind of like the musician's musician. But he would even like show up on things like that. There was, I think I saw an image of him and Michael Naismith of the Monkees, and they were dressed as each other.
Yes. Yes, I saw that. I actually watched that clip the other day on YouTube.
Okay.
It was a segment on one of the episodes of the Monkees, and it's just Mike Nesmith and Frank Zappa talking to each other, and they're supposed to be playing each other, a conversation with each other, but they're like, it's such a loose premise. They're falling out of character and basically becoming this. It's really funny. So he, I guess he was a known figure at the time, but I guess more as time went on, he became more
respected as a musician.
Yeah. By the general public. Yeah. I definitely respect him more. I'm now after hearing this. I just like and honestly, the balls to just say, I'm just going to make the kind of music I want to make. And especially at that time when, at the time it's like pop, like you simple 3-minute pop songs, like, not simple, but like the Beatles, the Monkees, that sort of stuff is like Beach Boys. That stuff is what was popular at the time. And for him to say, well, I'm not going to do any of that, it's kind of brave because he's fully capable. He's fully capable to do that sort of stuff. But
also at the same time, you're thinking there's also people like Harry Belafonte and the Righteous Brothers and Frank Sinatra were still really big at that time too. So it's sort of that idea of pop. And I mean, it was the pop rock, but there was also the other pop that was kind of, because there's elements of that in this as well, but he's also not, I would say he's making fun of it, but he's making fun of it in almost a respectful way, in a kind of way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
He's,
it's almost like, it's kind of like what Weird Al does.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
in that sort
pretty
of
good. I mean, it's not exactly what Weird Al does. Although, actually, another thing that apparently something that Frank Zappa used to do just for fun before of this was writing parodies of pop music. So he used to actually do that. So actually comparing him to Weird Al is a lot more,
Yeah, but I mean, like, more in the spirit of what Weird Al's very respectful to the artists that he parodies, and like sort of in the same sort of spirit.
In the same sort of spirit. But well,
that's interesting though. I didn't know that Frank Zappa wrote parody songs too.
I don't know if any of them ever made a record, but that's what he used to do for fun. So,
well, that's cool. Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. But so that brings us to the question: would you listen to this again?
Oh yeah,
yeah. I definitely would too. Probably the first half more than the second. I think I would have to be. I would put on the first half as like just casual listening. But like if I'm gonna sit down and listen to it, I would play the whole thing. Because I still enjoy the second half. For sure. Yeah.
It's a little bit more wild, but Trouble Every Day always gets me to put on the second half, at least part way. I'm a big fan of Hungry Freaks Daddy and Trouble Every Day are probably my two favorites.
Those were probably, I agree. Those are probably the two standouts for me. Yeah. But anyway, I guess we'll end the episode there. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, we want to hear from you, whether you agree or disagree with our review of the album. You can go to our website, polyphonicpress.com, and click on the contact page. And while you're there, you can go to the support page. You can support us on Patreon, or just honestly just share the show with your friends and spread the word, because it helps us keep making these shows. And I think that just about does it. All the links and everything are in the description. So if you want to reach out to us, just follow those links there. And I think that just about does it. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
I'm John Van Dyke.
Take it easy.